All right, Charles and Puya, how you guys doing? Let's see, we're doing this late in the evening on Sunday the 13th because we want to get this to everybody as quick as possible, the stuff we're going to talk about. As I take it, you're both in the Phoenix airport, but nowhere near each other. Is that correct?
Maybe we're going to get this quickly to people. We don't know yet. Okay, we got to see how good it is.
Fair, it's fair. But what terminal are you? What airline are you flying, Puya?
I am flying on the American airline to Pennsylvania right now. And it'll be a very short podcast, I think, because I was supposed to get on the plane technically 10 minutes ago to start boarding, but it just got delayed. So I have a little bit more time.
It got delayed. And I'm heading to
Phoenix Airport.
Michigan and for a day, and then I'm going to go to Pennsylvania as well. So it's go time, man.
Absolutely.
Go time. First crossing the country. Ben is in Pennsylvania right now, and she is on her way to Michigan also, I think.
So I asked all three of you with Ben also if we could do a podcast tied around some material that I listened to today from David Plouffe, who's a campaign advisor to the Harris campaign and a former Barack Obama campaign manager in both 08 and 12. Some really good stuff. It connects to the work we're doing. So I just messaged the three of you and said, hey, could we do a podcast episode? Yeah. And you're like, yeah, we can at 7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. And I said, I'm down for that because 4 a.m. is like my sweet spot. All right. So I was
sure it is. Sure.
I was good. I was good for that. But just wasn't going to work then as easily. And this is going to work real well. Miss Ben, wish she could be here, but good for Ben to get some sleep too.
Yeah.
Okay,
man. So so you have to prove to us that this is worth sending out to the volunteers.
Well,
and also you're talking about this super awesome podcast thing that happened, and I'm going to reserve judgment on that.
That's fine. So this is the Withcp podcast, and this is what we're calling the final stretch period. These last couple of weeks, final stretch in terms of our work, final stretch in terms of our fundraising, all of that, and the Pod Save America folks who, have sent a lot of people our way with Vote Save America have added 4 additional podcasts on Sundays. So 4 special Sunday podcasts. And today was their first one.
We started extra podcasts a long time ago. They're just catching up.
It's true. Yeah, I think they did reference that on the podcast today about the Withcp.
They did.
Okay.
They did. They were like, we're copying Common Power. I remember that. Yep.
So David Plouffe is the first person, and I got a couple clips from Plouffe's commentary, and the first one is right off the beginning. And so Pfeiffer, what's Pfeiffer's first name? Dan Pfeiffer introduces Plouffe to start here. So what I want to do with each of these 3 clips is play them and then get you two to react to them in the context of Common Power. Okay, so here's what they're saying about the campaign, and you two to translate them into the Common Power lens. We want to do this tight, quick as a thing hopefully for our volunteers. Okay, so here we go.
For the CP Nation, as you're starting to say, huh?
CP Nation for sure, man. Let's go. Cheers.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Let's just make sure that you can hear this when stop if you can't hear. So here we go. This is clip 1, Plouffe today.
David Plouffe and I worked on the Obama campaign together. He was Obama's campaign manager in 2008. He was senior advisor in the White House. And when he left, I took his old job. There is no one whose political instincts I trust more. So let's get into it. Here's David Plouffe.
Dan Pfeiffer, always a privilege to talk politics with you.
Okay, we are in the middle of a quadrennial tradition. It's October. There is panic in the streets. Axios today says the blue wall is crumbling. The vibes are everywhere. Every anxious Democrat in town is calling every political reporter in earshot to vet their concerns. Where do you see the race right now, and how has it changed, if at all, in the last couple of weeks?
Well, Dan, I think from the time Kamala Harris became the nominee, we saw a lot of movement. 5-6 points, depending on the state. But what we've seen for the last few weeks, and the data is consistent this week, is basically a tied race in 7 states. And I don't think that's going to change. So, I think it's 47-48 for each of us. I'd still rather be Kamala Harris than Donald Trump because I think she's got a slightly higher ceiling. I think she's got a better ability to win more of the undecideds based on who they are. And I think Donald Trump is much more reliant on first-time and infrequent voters this time. I think he's got a fragile mathematical problem there. So you put all that together, but the reality is, Donald Trump barely won in 16, but won, barely lost in 20. He's a little stronger this time than he was last time. So he's going to get 48% of the vote. And so I know for all of us that want to see Kamala Harris win, we wish there was an easy pathway. That pathway does not exist. This is basically going to come down to, history would suggest it's not going to come down to several thousand votes in seven states, but it's going to come down to a very narrow margin. And so I think the question for people who've already done so much, quite frankly, is, what else can be done? Because every ounce of effort spent by anybody, sharing content, making calls, making another donation, traveling to a battleground state, matters, because this thing is going to be decided on the margin. So I think the freak out is because there were a bunch of polls, I'd say, in the last month that showed a lead for Kamala Harris that was not real. It's not what we were seeing. We've seen this thing basically be tied, let's say, since, mid-September. So this is the race we have. It's the race we expected. I don't think it's going to open up for either candidate. I think it's going to be close all the way in. And I would just remind everybody, whether it's internal data or public data, a poll that shows Donald Trump up 48-47 that then shows us up 48-47 is essentially the same thing. This thing's going to be decided on the margins in these few number of states.
Okay. That's the first segment. That's his high
Go
level.
ahead, Plouffe.
analysis.
Plouffe, go ahead. You go first.
I feel like he said something that we have been talking about for a few months. I don't think there was anything necessarily super new about it in terms of the information. That was just like, wow, okay, I did not think about this. I think it's about the importance of the work that we're doing as well. To his point, if it's about a few $1,000s, we talked about this in Arizona on Saturday morning, that Joe Biden won by 10,000 votes in Arizona. That's 5,000 undecided voters that could go the other way. In Arizona, we have done 5,000 doors in 2 days right now in 98, 102-degree weather. So that's what it is. That's where the margin is, talking to undecided voters and turning out our base. So not surprised by the information, just extra motivation for us to keep going.
This brings up a point, what we talked about, I think last time I was on here, David. Maybe when I called from Philly, downtown Philly, before that podcast we taped there. The polls are based around like voter intent, and voter suppression plays such a big role into this.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not that's successful, that I feel like that's the other measure that nobody's talking about. So that's like whenever I hear polls, that's my overarching feeling on all of this, is whether or not those forces can be beaten back or overcome. So here's my other thing. How is it that the polling is exactly the same in a state like North Carolina after what we saw happen in that state? And after the Republican governor had such a massive scandal, staff quit, very clear this is him doing all these things, and the polls are just not, they don't reflect that. And it's either that it doesn't matter to the electorate, or that the polls are just not right. And I think I would bet on the polls not being right.
I don't take Plouffe's comments to be so much about polls. I take Plouffe's comments to be about the race is very close. The race is very close. That there is not a separation of 5 to 7 points. And anybody, if you're looking for that, it's never going to happen.
What I'm saying is that I don't think it's as close as what he's saying.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's
in
great.
some states.
I'm sorry, man. I trust you. I believe
no, he's
in you,
David Plouffe. He's David Plouffe.
Okay.
I understand.
Exactly.
I understand. Who am I? He's David Plouffe, probably
Okay.
right all the time.
Great. We're moving
Go
on to
ahead.
the second clip now. The
Next.
second clip.
Is it shorter? Because that last one was 2.5 minutes.
No, it's not shorter.
God.
This one's longer. This one is about undecided voters and the kinds of folks that we're talking to. Okay. And why they're important.
All right.
So let's talk about the persuadable voter universe, the undecideds. How big is that universe, and who are those voters?
It's not that big, but it's probably a true undecided, and let's be clear about that. That is people that we certainly believe they are going to vote, and they yet have not decided between Harris and Trump. That's like 4%. Then you have a little bit of soft Trump support, soft Harris support that I'm sure both campaigns are spending time on. Then you've got people who might be deciding between Harris and third party or Trump and third party, or whether to vote at all. So you've got to treat them all as a unit, right? You've got to run a campaign to reach those undecideds and hope more of them in a tied race. If more of them fall to your side, that's a huge deal, and we think we can do that. And then you've got these other questions around, turnout and third party. The third party number is going to be pretty low, but it's not going to be zero. So, the question is, in some of these states, you might be able to win it at 49, but you might have to go closer to 49.5, 49.7. And in every state, it's a variety of people. This is not like there's one cohort. It's like, most of the undecideds are suburban women between ages of 40 and 60. You've got young, you've got black, you've got white, you've got brown, you've got non-college, college. So from a campaign perspective, it's challenging because you've got a bunch of different types of voters who receive information in a bunch of different types of way that you got to reach. And you want to be in their communities. You want to be in their social media feeds. You obviously want to do advertising. Hopefully they'll see the candidate where, as you have seen and have commented on, where Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to go everywhere there's an audience, basically, of people that we think will be decisive in this election.
And, I think in previous campaigns, sometimes you have a diverse group of people who make up your undecided universe, but you have a commonality in persuasive messages, right? For us in 2012, it didn't matter whether we were trying to get Latino voters or rural rural non-college educated white voters. It was the economic message is what brought them to the finish line for us. Do you have that here, or are we sort of in a more fragmented space where we have a slightly different approach to each of these groups?
Well, the economy is at the top of the list, of course, and I think we made big progress on that from when the race started in terms of people saying, who do you trust to look after people like you? Who has economic plans that will help people like me? We've in some places taken the lead on that, and we're down double digits. So economy is huge, and that's contrast. Trump's plan will raise taxes by $4,000. It'll blow up the deficit. It'll create inflation. And of course, it'll be targeted towards the wealthy. So that's very important. Healthcare is important both from an economic lens, because voters, as you know, look at it, usually first and foremost through an economic lens and then a healthcare lens. So you've got Trump going to cost people a lot more money, and also tens of millions of people lose coverage. Huge issue. Abortion's important to some of these voters, particularly on the turnout side. But there's also the character traits, which is, who do you trust to be a strong leader? Who's stable? And again, I think we've made huge progress in that regard. So, the ads we're running this week, not solely because we're running a lot of different ads to a lot of different people, have people who worked for Trump speaking about how unstable he is and how unfit he is. And we also have a bunch of, military leaders and Republicans saying that Kamala Harris has the strength and judgment to be commander-in-chief. That's an important part of the message. At the same time as you're driving economic contrast, healthcare contrast. And we're also at a point in she does this in interviews. We still do it, in some of our ads. Trump is 100% universally known. Now, it's not 100% universally known the damage he'll do to the country. We got to remind people of that. But, even things like Kamala Harris's biography, there's still some voters out there who will decide this election that aren't sure she was a prosecutor, that don't understand what she did there, don't understand her middle-class upbringing. We've made a lot of progress there, so I think we filled in a lot of that circle. So, I think that it's a bunch of different things, and with data, you have a sense of what messages matter the most, but it's not just let's compare economic plans and values. That is, of course, at the top of the pyramid. But we've got to do these other things too. And
it's a complicated universe of undecided voters out there, right? We can't hand you a single piece to talk about with the economy. I did hear his talking points in there. He read off 4 straight off the bat, right, about the economy. He said something about healthcare. It was all that quick, that tight. So I think that part of the challenge that we have is that we have a fragmented audience, not only folks we have to talk to that are R's and independents, but that they have different reasons for being R's and independents. And you guys see, I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, it is kind of all over the place. It's not just a single thing. There is a through line though, in that it's a lot of them are men. The women are ones who are, they're very much connected to reproductive rights, but they've made up their mind secretly, often in the same household. So those are folks that we go after because they're registered independents or Republicans, and we just need to confirm that it's, what we think is true is that they're going to flip our direction. You got something to add on that, Puya?
Yeah, I think he didn't touch necessarily on this, but state by state, there's quite a bit as well. Like some of the issues that are happening, like that are important to folks maybe in Arizona or Nevada, who are, the South border states is very different compared to, folks in Pennsylvania. So I think that's something to consider for us as well. And that's something that we have kind of talked about with our volunteers. So like, depending on the state that you go, when you're talking to independents, when you're talking to these folks that may go our way, we're not really sure what kind of messaging is going to work out or resonate with them. But even then, it's going to be challenging. We're getting folks in Pennsylvania who are very concerned about immigration. And it's just like, oh, wow, okay, you're in Pennsylvania and immigration is your top issue. And you may not expect that. So it is also some of that through lines depending on the state, but also you get some of these unexpected conversations that throws you off. And then you're just like, you gotta be quick to be able to hold that conversation. I think our volunteers have been doing pretty well with that.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to what I was saying before about like, hey, I don't think it's that close in North Carolina. If we thought that all the swing states were 1% margin, we'd have the same amount of people in all of our states. We'd have the same amount of teams and trips and everything in all of these 7 states. And we don't. It's because we understand that there's actually a rank order. We actually think that that it's tighter in Pennsylvania than it is in North Carolina. It's tighter in Arizona than it is in Nevada or something like that. Like we actually and the messaging is one that we think our volunteers can carry better. So we've considered all those things.
And last thing on that real quick, sorry to cut you off, David.
Okay.
I think the perspective that is, they're talking about is very, very much just focused on Harris. And we do not just focus on Harris. That's another thing that we took into account in our calculation around where we want to invest more. We looked at up and down the ballot, every single race possible pretty much. So I think that's something else that kind of adds a new level of nuance around where you want to put your resources and extra bodies on the ground.
I think that we also take into account the prioritization of the states to getting to 270 or to the winning the Senate. So I do not share your sentiment that North Carolina, that the Harris campaign has like some kind of lead there. All right. I think it's extremely close there. So I would not say that North Carolina is somehow we're in a better position because we're only doing two visits there. Pennsylvania is essential to win the presidency. All right. So we have 4 teams there over the course of time because it is the linchpin state for it. So I think we are very, very close in all the states. That's where I see it. We're extremely close in all the states. I couldn't tell you which one we're more further ahead, although I feel good about Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right, next clip.
Yep. This one's about the difference makers. What makes the difference?
There's a lot of concern out there among folks about the possibility of another polling error where the polls are underestimating Trump support. I mean, the public polls were way off in 2020, but even the Biden campaign polls were data was off in the sense that he was campaigning in Ohio and Iowa at the very end there. And those states ended up performing just like they did in 2016. How are you guys thinking about that? Have you adjusted sort of your modeling or your polling to try to ensure you don't have a similar situation this time?
Right. So I'd say I wasn't part of the campaign in 20, neither were you, but I think their data was much better than the public polls. That's why they weren't
Yeah.
going to Florida and Texas, for instance,
Right.
because they didn't see a pathway, even though public polls were suggesting that it was essentially a tie. So we spent a lot of time on this. I think the lesson you'll learn, because of course, Republicans were, their strength was overrated in 2022. 18 was probably a blend. So I think what you want to do is make sure that you're being very conservative. And I think we are. So I don't think we're sitting here with internal data showing a really tight race where we'd rather be us than Trump. And it's based on undercounting either his vote share among certain demographics or his turnout. I think we've all learned that lesson. So, but I'd say a couple things. One is, I think Kamala Harris may surprise at the end of the day with either straight up Republicans or independents who are essentially Republicans. We're seeing continued strength there. And that matters a great deal given how big those cohorts are. So, and we're being conservative there as well. We're not overstating our numbers internally, but I think you see the leading edge of things that could be quite positive. And then again, I think Trump is just incredibly reliant on voters who've either never voted before, haven't voted in a long time, never voted Republican. So, that's a big challenge. As we look at the race, we give him credit for doing a good job there, because my view on Trump, basically to break it down, is, if you think he's going to get 100 votes in a precinct, you probably just assume he gets 110, so you can win a race where he overperforms. So I really can't speak to the public polls. I spend very little time looking at them.
As I know you do.
I just don't. And most of them are horseshit. Some of them may be close, but generally I'd say any poll that shows Kamala Harris up 4 to 5 points in one of these 7 states, ignore it. Any point that shows Donald Trump up like that, ignore it. This thing's very close. It's a margin of error race. But again, I'd rather be us than him, because I think we have the ability to get to 49.5 or 50. I'm much more confident about that than Donald Trump, but it's going to be close all the way in. So I think we're doing what we can to be conservative in the data. And obviously, we're a campaign that has a bunch of different sources of data, as we did in the Obama days. You have traditional polling where traditional pollsters are calling, 600 or 800 people. Some of that's calling, some of that's online panels, but we're also doing the larger data sets, where you have a larger amount of respondents. And that's always good, because not only do you have a little more confidence in the overall numbers, but then you've got enough respondents so you can really look under the hood at different ethnicities, different age, education, to make sure that we think all that makes sense. But listen, I think it may be that our internal data is exactly right. But if I were to hazard a guess, I think it may be undercounting her strength amongst Republican-leaning independents. So we won't put that in the bank, but let's hope that's right.
Are you guys projecting?
And then this closing nugget, I skipped forward a few seconds, but here's how he closes.
In the case, I think it has intensified with the way people get information. But I still think at the end of the day, listen, this, it's always humbling when you're a campaign professional, when you tell people how little the campaign matters, meaning a good campaign is not going to turn a 54 or 46 loss into a win. It's impossible. But if you have the best campaign on the ground and you think you execute best against your goals, it can give you a half a point or a point, which of course this race very well could come down to. So that's what you're doing all this for, basically.
So that's Plouffe. That's what we're doing it all for, is that 1%.
I mean, okay. Yes. And he's saying that when he says they're being conservative about Trump, or they're being conservative about Kamala.
About Kamala.
Yeah, I think so too. That's what I'm saying. I think they're being conservative about her. I agree with him about national polls. I think they're garbage. I think that when people do polling averages, wasn't it a story just came out was it a few days ago that showed that like the number of national pollsters that are outright Republican partisan, there's like 5 or 7 of them or something, and there's only one Democrat one, and yet they still get lumped into the averages.
Yeah, that was the podcast 2 days ago. So the issue of the flooding the zone by Republican pollsters,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
what I get from Plouffe here is the issue of they're looking at their data, they're being conservative in their planning, which has been the methodology all the way through to not overstate where we're at. And that
Right.
the ability to move an electorate 1%, which a ground game could possibly do, could be determinative.
Yeah, I think it's still the case. And I think it's the case in the right states. I think it's hard to go on a show like Pod Save and talk about like this national race and not go state by state and speak generally. Again, back to North Carolina. I'm just gonna keep hitting this. Polls are measuring the voters and what they think. And the polls are going to show actually something more favorable to us. And my actual belief is that voter suppression, regardless of what's going on with the Republican governor, is going to tamp down our performance in that state. And so we're not going to win, which is what factors into our deployment and us saying, okay, we'll try a little bit there. But because we think that they've got that state, we're gonna push harder on the blue wall and on Pennsylvania.
I see.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think I also do agree around the whole, public polls not being right. I think from our experience of the doors, we do see that Kamala is actually doing fairly well with the independents. Because when we go to these doors, like the campaigns, like these are true independents and leading Republicans. They're literally registered Republicans, some of these doors that we're going to. And I think as talented as they may be, I think a good portion, over 50% of them, are still going our way, and if they're willing to listen and consider voting for Kamala, or at least we get some sort of indication that Trump is not going to be their candidate. So I'm hopeful. I think it is good for the campaign not to get too cocky around this whole like we got this in the bag. I think it's good for them to be conservative. I think it's also good for us to get the same mentality that like, yes, we're gonna have this hope, but we got to get going in Pennsylvania and the blue wall states.
Yeah. And I think that to keep in perspective how much we can do, we can move a percentage point or two at max out there. But in this close of an election, that can easily be the difference in the blue wall in an Arizona, in a Nevada, can easily be the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the current measurements for success. I mean, these polls measure what the voters think, but I think when we go, okay, so then what's the chance of success here? And what we're factoring in, and I think what the campaigns are factoring in, is that there's actually another score for some of these states, and that's actually what is our ability to move, and that's what we've been saying on the ground, which is that what is the margin of effort? And we think the margin of effort is something that's doable. So when people ask us, what do you think about this state? What do you think about our chances in the state? What do you think about our ability to win? We're confident. We're not saying we're confident in a vacuum. We're saying we're confident with us sending 4 trips out to Arizona with 200 people on the last 2 trips. That's what we think.
Per trip, by the way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, what's the number for the last 2 trips? I think it's 200 for the last trip, I think, and then the one before that's like 150 or something for you.
Yeah, and I think the numbers are going to keep growing as well. We just had 100 people, and many folks were like, you know what, I'm coming back in 2 weeks, and they were not signed up. So,
well, no, go ahead.
No, I mean, I pressed them on that. Actually, I said, you got to come back. Actually, you know what happened was, you're going to love this, David. At the debrief session, Larcy was like, everyone's like feeling good and everything. And Larcy was like, if you really feel good when you get home, you're going to go to the donate page. Continue to support us or something. And I was like, are you selling right now? David's going to love this. But I followed up with you should come back out with me, knock doors.
I love that because the core of Common Power to me is the integrity of our statements to our volunteers. To me, that's the hills we die upon. All right. When we say to people that when you go out in the field, you're going to go to a place where your presence is going to make a difference. That's true.
Yes.
That's true. The margin of effort.
Every time.
When we say to people that we're going to be ready for you out in the field with a diverse group of leadership, hell yes, we are. You guys have made it so. When we say to people we're going to invest in young leaders or we're going to invest in these educators, we do that over and over and over again. That's what we do. And so the integrity of all of that to me is what leads me to believe that in this close of election, in which we're in the final stretch of, it is legitimately the case to say that the effort by any one of us can be a difference maker. All right. Like there is no hyperbole in that when we say that 10 more people in Arizona could make the difference. All right. 10 more people in North Carolina, even though Charles believes that that we're not going to get there. I think we can get there. I think he thinks we can get there too, but he's right. You're right, Charles, about the concerns about voter suppression there. So I just that's the point of this podcast to me is the point that we don't make massive differences, but you don't need to make massive differences. What we make is strategically effective differences. Those surgical differences is what we bring at Common Power. And I'm proud of that. I'm really, really proud of the work you all do on the field and the work that we do and the work that we ask everybody to support.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, going back to North Carolina and tying that back to Republicans who are voting our way. I know Pooya, you said independents, but I actually think that whenever we go to a Republican door, like if that person's on our list, they are more fired up to vote our way than the independents. I think the independents on our list are like, win me over, but the Republicans seem to be so done with the divisiveness, with Trump's personality, with the, people's rights being taken away. They're done with it and they're ready to come over. And I thought about the voter suppression variable is that I think that there's a possibility that our fears about the Supreme Court in North Carolina, for instance.
Yeah.
Our fears about those kinds of groups of people is that there are Republicans amongst them who are not going to do, they're going to be the Pence. They're going to be the Mike Pence that, has made a bunch of terrible decisions. And then all of a sudden, makes the right one at the right time. And there's a possibility that happens in North Carolina and states.
I totally agree. I think that Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas are brutal. They're brutal on that fact. That's totally true. And that's what's going to give us so much joy when we flip them. Right. I want to close this podcast with the words of Kamala Harris, the voice of her. There have been people for the last week and a half who have said, why did you start to focus as a campaign, Harris and Walz, on reaching out to all these Republicans? Where's the aggressiveness? Where's the energy? Where's the criticism? All right. And I just want to say to everybody that's been wondering that, I believe that it's been a strategy, that there's been this interregnum essentially for them to reach out to others, to point out that they're reasonable and to assuage white people's concerns about voting for Kamala Harris. And now they're going to close strong. And a strong is going to be a critique of Trump at all, but also a welcome to Republicans. And we saw it today in North Carolina. Harris spoke today at a great rally there, and it was a very different energy. It was back from her. It was wonderful to see. So I want to close with this. This is a short clip. I know you two got to get on the plane.
We are really excited to see each other. I couldn't be more excited to see everybody here, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a tight race until the very end. And we are running as the underdog. So we have some hard work ahead of us, but we like hard work. Hard work is good work. And with your help in 23 days, we will win. We will win. We will win. Yes, we will. We will win. So what we know
hard work. That's what we're doing out in the field. Hard work. And I know you
It's a
guys,
good clip, man.
you guys are talking all the time about the hard work. This is fucking hard work. Thank you. Thanks for the leadership you're all doing, and everybody who's traveling, and everybody who's supporting everybody who's traveling.
Oh yeah.
They're also talking behind me is to call to go board my plane. But this is what it takes. It takes being out here in 100-degree weather in Arizona, knocking doors, and then hopping on a plane to go to Pennsylvania to knock on doors in 50-degree weather. So this
A
is
red-eye
it.
flight.
We
You're
got-
both getting on red-eye
red-
flights right now.
We
Yeah.
are getting on red-eye flights, getting there in Michigan, Pennsylvania, 7 a.m. to be at the kickoff with the teams at 8:30 in the morning. This is what it takes. This is what we are putting into it. And our volunteers are bringing the same level of dedication by being in Arizona, Pennsylvania, wherever they can go to knock on full trip for one day, whatever they can do. We appreciate them very much.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, people, I mean, I say this out in the field, but people on the ground, like I think we're all contributing to the effort. And also there's something special that folks give when they show up in person. There's real risk involved. There's careers that are put on hold. There's families that are at home that folks are missing. My daughter's she started preschool this year, and I'm missing a bunch of that. And I think about it all the time.
Yep. I know it. All right. Let's go, folks. It's hard work. It's good work. This is our work. This is the assignment. Thanks, you guys. We'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks for Pooh, you're going to Michigan, right?
I'm going to Pennsylvania. Charles is going to Michigan.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you both. All right.
Thanks
Thanks for holding on the fort, man. Take care.
Let's go. Let's go, everybody.
Take care.